Okay, in part two of the organizational theory lecture, we're going to be talking about a different group of theorists that said, well, we do not exactly agree with the scientific management school, and based on the work of the Hawthorne experiments, they're saying we see that there's other things going on, and that's what we'd like to talk about. Okay, so when it comes to this particular group of theorists, it's the human relations school, and that's what it's called. I like to call it the touchy-feely school, and it started in about the 1930s. Now, the first one that I want to talk about is her name is Mary Follett. And so she kind of wrote ahead before her time, or the things that she was saying really did not take effect until much later. I mean, probably like in the 90s. But anyway, she came out saying, and she was one of the few female theorists that were writing at this particular point in time. So she says she opposed scientific management because she said she believed that the process of producing work is more important than the product itself. The process was more important. And she said that this process, the way that people actually do their jobs, can lead to spirituality and self-evaluation. This later on took more effect, or people started to look at it in different ways, or people started to think about things in different ways of, what workers do and how they feel about their jobs. And the most important thing that she said is that, what people do, or the process of how people work and the things that they do, the processes that they go through, will engender this value of trust in people. And so, when you talk about work, I would say that one of the most important things is to value your employees, or people want to be valued as well. Now, the next theorist I want to talk about is Chester Bernard. And Chester Bernard was a CEO at, I think, Southwestern Bell. And so he was writing about this particular model called the zone of indifference theory. And it was part of the leadership theory. And he says, I see that the principles of POSCOR do exist, but they don't really fit reality. And the POSCOR, if you don't remember, is the planning, organizing, staffing, directing, that one right there. They're saying there's more to managing than just, doing these functions. And as a leader, what you need to do is you need to be able to influence and motivate people in order for them to be able to fulfill these functions, these post corp functions of government. And in order to do that, they need to be able to uh, consider what they're doing to be important. And we tend to underestimate the importance of what people do in these positions, these functions, if it's planning, organizing, budgeting, staffing, or whatever. And the way that you do that is by communicating with people. And he thought that communication was really like the most important element of management. And he's saying if you don't communicate with your staff, your workers, you're not going to have that didactic, that two-way way of talking to people. And so the only way that you're going to be able to be an effective leader and to have that authority of the leader is for the workers to see you as a leader. So your authority is vested in by the workers, that saying that you are the leader, and yes, we are willing to follow your example or your directives. So according to what Bernard was saying, he's saying is that in order to function as manager within this zone of indifference that he's going to be talking about, cover that in just a little bit, he says you need to understand yourself first. Now that's a pretty tall order, because I'm not sure that we ever really truly understand ourselves. But you have to be aware of our own inner feelings. Again, that's kind of like a high order, because I'm not sure that we really truly understand our own inner feelings about a lot of things. We can to be conflicted about a lot of things. But more importantly, he says it's possible to achieve the same outcome using different methods. So multiple possibilities to accomplish outcomes. There is no one best way, which is contradicting what Frederick Taylor said way at the beginning when I said he was saying one best way. He says no, there's more ways to do things. And he said and what's important here again is the communication, because different people have different levels of expertise, understanding, the ability to get a job done. Some people need more direction, some people need less direction. So you just have to know your workers, and the only way that you can do that is by communicating with them. So this zone of indifference that he's talking about, he says managers need to stay within this zone of indifference in order to get the job done. Otherwise, they're going to be resistant. to changes or to what needs to be done. Now, this zone of indifference, I have a graphic for you. This zone of indifference are the organizational goals, because surely you realize that an organization has goals that may be contradictory to the goals of the person of the worker. So the zone of difference is a person's beliefs and values. So the best example I can give you for this, 'cause I know this one's a little bit difficult to understand, is that we had a Supreme Court ruling several years ago, might even be like 10 years ago or so, about same-sex marriages, and this was a Supreme Court ruling, and it was based on the equity clause. And so basically they're saying, because it was a Supreme Court ruling, all states have to abide by this ruling. And a lot of the southern states, including Texas, already had some type of a law or amendment or whatever saying marriages between a man and a woman. Well, there was an instance, and I think it might have been like in South Carolina or maybe Georgia, one of those mid-Atlantic states, that she did not want to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couple. She refused based on religious grounds. That's the zone of difference, the personal beliefs and values. She said, no, my religious beliefs will not allow me to do that. So the way it was finally resolved, I mean, there was lawsuits, etc., but the way it was finally resolved, they're saying you as a county clerk needs to issue a marriage license. You yourself do not have to do it, but someone from your office needs to go ahead and issue that marriage license. So that's kind of how they took care of it. So that's the organizational goals. Yes, we have the Supreme Court ruling, the zone of difference, personal beliefs, and that's kind of how so you have to have communication in order to resolve things. Okay, then came another theorist by the name of Kurt Lewin, and these are psychologists. Most of these are psychologists. And so this was the 1930s, and he's saying, I would look at different leadership styles, and he was going to study 3 different types of leadership styles, and he was looking at the output of 10-year-old boys, or how do 10-year-old boys react given different management styles, leadership styles. And so what he was looking at were the authoritarian style, the laissez-faire style, and the democratic style. So the authoritarian is very directive. I'm going to tell you what to do. The laissez-faire is like, well, whatever. The democratic one is more negotiation and compromise. So these are the results of this particular study. The highest work output period was the authoritarian, and this was like very much micromanagement. But without the leader, it came out the third. So basically it was saying the leader was micromanaging. The laissez-faire without the leader came in third because they just decided they didn't want to do much. Without a leader, it came in second. Whereas a democratic a democratic style of leadership, with the leader, it was the second, and without a leader, it was the first. Came out the first. That's how they placed. So basically, it's saying the democratic style of leadership is the one where you can get workers to commit to the most. You'll get most work out of them because it leads to satisfaction within their work. So let me put it to you another way. If a person has input into the process, or if a process is going to be changing, even though that process may not be what they wanted, but as long as they had input into the process, they are more likely to agree to that process, the compromise. And so we call this empowering the workers, getting group buy-in on certain things, because it does lead to satisfaction with the work, because they're saying, at least I had a voice. They listened, because didn't come out in my favor, but at least I had a voice in what I thought about it. And that really does matter to people. Okay, the human organizationalists were writing in the 1940s, and so they were saying, okay, back to the job. It's back to what people think and what people think about their job. And so when it comes to people in the United States, probably more so than in a lot of countries, people in the United States say, my work has to have intrinsic value. What I do needs to matter to me. Because people work to satisfy on-the-job needs as well as off-the-job needs. And that's another way of saying, guess what? We identify a lot with our jobs. We tend to identify a lot with our jobs because anytime you go anywhere, you go to a party or whatever, one of the first things that people say is, what do you do? What do you do? I mean, you ask it, they ask it. We identify with our jobs. We don't know who we are without our jobs. I don't know if that's a good thing or it's a bad thing. That's kind of the way it is here. Okay, so work is central interest to most people because one, they want to find work to be interesting in its own right. That whatever they're doing is going to have some impact on, the economy, on business, on society, or whatever. And for many people, and as I said, especially here in the United States, it's a central organizing factor in people's lives. Some countries will work to live, other countries will live to work. Guess which one we are. But anyway, so when it comes to this guy Lewin, what he says is that people that are working for you, as a manager, you should offer positive reinforcement and positive management approaches in order to give like praise to workers whenever they deserve it, not just to give it just whenever they deserve it, and that will make them feel more valued, and it'll bring trust into that relationship that you have with your leader. Okay, the next theorist is Abraham Maslow. And Maslow wrote in the 1940s, and what he was saying that he's looking at motivation, and he says, well, what motivates people? And so he set it up, and again, he was a psychologist, and he set it up based on an order of needs. And so you go from a lower order to a higher order. And these can be applied to your personal life, but also to the workplace. And so what he was saying is that the lower order need needs to be satisfied first. Then you can go up in rank, ascend, and then ascend, and then ascend. But if at some point you're in some place in your life and something happens, it kind of like tumbles back down to the first level where you have to satisfy the lowest level of need. So let's go through these. Okay, the first one is physiological, and that's that you have food, clothing, shelter, that you feel that you have enough to meet your daily basic needs. Now, the second level up is saying, okay, I have my food, clothing, shelter, whatever, but I want to feel safe. I want to feel that I have enough money, that I have job security, that I have a stable life. That's what I need, not just living paycheck to paycheck to find out if I'm going to have enough food or money to pay the rent or whatever. Okay, so once you have that, the next level up is a feeling of acceptance. And the feeling of acceptance is basically saying, I need to feel that my peers or my supervisor values what I do. It's the feeling of acceptance. The next level up is self-esteem, or you might even call this like ego. So this says, I have recognition as a person. I know that I'm doing a good job. I know that I know my job, and I know that I can do it well. But not only that, I have the ability to accept criticism and or feedback about what I'm doing and not go all ballistic, not go postal. So that's like the next level up. You have recognition as a person. Then the highest level is self-actualization, and most people don't ever get to this point because it's kind of like a pie in the sky type of thing. And it says, you should be able to integrate your work with your personal needs. In other words, you are your job. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but basically that's self-actualization, and that you're able to give yourself feedback about what you're doing right or what you're doing wrong. That whatever challenges may be presented to you, that you can work around them and get around them or change your ways in order to accommodate whatever challenges are going to be coming around, and that you are aware of your accomplishments, that you don't need people to tell you that you're doing a good job because you are aware of your accomplishments already. As I said, this is kind of pie in the sky. Most people don't ever get to this point. Okay, the next theorist is Hertzberg. And so a lot of these theorists from now on are going to be saying, or the next three anyway, are going to be saying the same thing, but they just put it like within different paradigms. So Hertzberg did a study, and so he studied accountants, engineers, and some non-professional people. And so he was asking people what motivates them. What motivates you to do your job? And so he ran this thing, it's called a factor analysis, but don't even worry about that. And so two factors emerged of what motivates people. The first one does not motivate, but it is not demotivate. It does not. It's not a dissatisfier. So basically, it's saying the hygiene factors are more extrinsic things that are out there, like salaries, fringe benefits, the corner office, relationship with supervisors, etc., etc. That's kind of extrinsic to the job itself. And if you don't have these things, it can make you unhappy. Those are dissatisfiers, so they can't be demotivators as well. but their presence does not motivate people. They're not particularly a motivating factor. According to Hertzberg, what is a motivating factor then are more intrinsic in nature, things that make you feel good about what you do. And these can be advancement opportunities, like a career ladder or whatever. They can be responsibilities that you're given for your job or on a job. Some people like want to move ahead and they want to have more responsibilities to prove themselves. It can also be recognition and achievement, and these are probably like the two most important motivators, that you are recognized in some way, whether it be an award, a good job, whatever your office has. It might be like a little bonus. It might be something to recognize that you're doing a good job. So a title, something to recognize that you have achievement. So in this particular, or one of the intrinsic motivators is that the type of work and the process by which you undertake that work can be rewards in themselves, and those are the ones that motivate you. Okay, then McGregor comes with his Theory X and Theory Y management styles. And again, they're applying it to different things, but basically they're saying how are people managed, or how do people like to be managed? And so nobody likes to be micromanaged, but sometimes some organizations need to have one style over another style. So we're going to be talking about Theory X and why the type of organizations that might need to have more of a Theory X management style as opposed to a Theory Y, because everybody wants Theory Y, but again, it's going to depend on the organization. Okay, so under the Theory X type of management style, there's certain assumptions about workers. And one of them is saying, you know what, you cannot trust these workers, so we have to really ride them. There's high levels of supervision. We have to really kind of like ride them to make sure that they're going to be doing their jobs. Let me see if I can go back that way. Okay. Well, before I get to the Theory Y, I think that one skipped. I don't know why I did. But under the Theory X also is that work is distasteful, that people don't really like to work. They don't really want to come to work. They're doing it for the paycheck. And you've heard that many times. Hey, man, I'm doing it for the paycheck, right? Okay, that people want supervision. They want close supervision. They don't want to have to think a lot about what they're doing or what they're not having to do. Just tell me what I need to do, basically. People are not very creative on the job, and people get you can only get people to work if you have sanctions or punishments. If you don't do this, I'm going to do this to you. If you don't do this, I'm going to do this to you. Okay, so the types of organizations for Theory X are more like manufacturing or assembly type jobs, something that you say has like a production deadline, that you need people to produce, at a certain level, because if they don't, then you're not going to meet your quota. This is more in the private sector more so than in the public sector, but it can also work in the public sector. I don't know if I ever told you this or not, but I used to work in the food stamp office, or for the state of Texas. And I did that like the first year. I think I kind of mentioned the last time in the last lecture. And so we had a time and motion study that they did in the Hawthorne studies, and they said you have to see X amount of people, X amount of people. And so that was like the production. You expected to see someone. So it was very Theory X oriented. You really didn't have much of discretion of what you were doing. I mean, these were the things that you had to look at, but that's just kind of the way it was. It was more production like. It didn't exactly suit me, but that was just me. A lot of people liked it. It didn't exactly suit me. But hey, I needed a job, right? All right. So then we get to Theory Y, and that's a little bit different. They're saying, people that prefer to have a Theory Y type of management style have like a different, the leaders have a different view of the workers. And so they're saying people that do best under this management style is that people consider to be work like play. And so people prefer to have their own, or to impose their own self-control. They have their own way of doing things. They know when they have to get things done, that they can meet the deadlines. You don't have to write them, that they're going to be putting out quality work. And so people are basically creative, and that's what they're saying. In these types of organizations, the more creative or the more learning type of organization that you may have, the better off you will be in having more of a theory Y management style. And so in this one, ego and social needs are the driving motivations and performances. And so for these types of organizations, these would be people like Microsoft or Apple or one of those, but also at this university, because we have we are we teach, we have meetings or whatever, but we also have to write, and that's like the creative part of our job. And so we prefer to have this theory Y management style. Don't tell me what to do. I know what needs to be done, that type of thing. Okay, now in the systems theory, there's this one organization, it's called the Rand Corporation. And so it came out of operations research after World War II. And so what they were looking at, they were saying they're looking at organizations, and they see that organizations are running more within like a systems way, a systems theoretical approach. So we're going to be talking about systems theory now. And so it's we were talking about the workers, how to manage the workers. Now we're going to be talking about the organization itself. So many people have written about systems management, but the most famous ones, or the first ones tried about it, let's put it that way, were Katz and Kahn. And so what they said their organizations can be either open or closed. And they are open, if there's a feedback loop, they're closed if there's no feedback loop. But closed organizations may not really be able to engage in incorporating external factors if there is no feedback loop, and I'll show you a graphic of that one in just a second. Open organizations, because you're opening yourself up to whatever environment, and I'll talk about that in a second, it can be more unstable, and it may be open to more conflict of what's going to be done in that particular organization. But in this particular model, and the importance of this particular model is that it functions around, or that organizations work around functions instead of tasks. And the functions are like the POSCORP that we were talking about, the planning, the organization, the staffing, the directing, all of those. Those are functions that need to be done. And they're saying, yes, you do need to pay attention to how you are managing your workers, but these things also need to be done because we need to have some type of output. And the output is basically the services that are delivered through programs. Okay, so this is the model for the closed system. So you have inputs, the throughputs, and then the outputs, and these are basically the programs, or the delivery of the programs here. The open system model is basically the same, but this is saying if we go through the outputs, at some point we have to do what's called a program evaluation, and you ask yourself, did it work? Did whatever we do in here, as it came out as an output, did it meet the goals of whatever the input was, to include the legislation on this part over here? And that's the feedback loop that goes all the way back to the inputs, from the outputs to the inputs, and saying, do we have to change what we're doing within the organization in the black box, the throughputs there, or do we have to just tweak it in some way and see what the organization is doing itself? So it just kind of depends on what that evaluation determines. So you're saying, well, what exactly is she talking about? This inputs, these throughputs, these outputs. So let's talk about that. Inputs are the political environment, the laws that were passed, the elected officials, other bureaucracies, political values, political will, resources, budgeting, all of those things. Those are all inputs saying, okay, well, this is what we have to deal with. The throughputs are the administrative values, and those administrative values are things like accountability and responsiveness and efficacy. Okay, those things that we value in the public sector, as opposed to the private sector where it's more profit, efficiency, productivity, that type of thing. The next throughput is the organizational theory, and that's basically how you are treating the people. And the last one is the components of public organization, which is the budgeting and the human resources, the staffing, the directing, and all that. So that's all the stuff that's done within a public agency. And the output of all of that are the services that are provided through the program. And that feedback loop that I was talking about, that's the feedback loop that's going to evaluate that program of what was being produced, production, if you want to call it that, what was being delivered, and find out, did it work, did it not work, do we need to change it, do we need a new law, do we just need to tweak it at the organizational level itself.